Matthew's genealogy is a paternal descent for Joseph. Jacob, a descendant of Solomon, is Joseph's biological father. He was born of Jacob the same way Solomon was born of David. I think Matthew uses the word Genealogy to make that clear, with few exceptions, like when he blots out the house of Ahab and Jehoiakim. He also says Yeshua was born of Mary, while only listing Joseph as her husband, to make it clear that Joseph was not his biological father. Luke's genealogy, though, is different. It traces Nathan's line, and it starts by saying that Yeshua was supposed to be the son of Joseph. The word is nemizo, meaning thought, so both confirm that Yeshua is not Joseph's biological son. Nomizo is derived from nomos, which is the word that generally signifies something pertaining to the law. In Luke 2, we see Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem in late August or September of 3 BC to register for the patriarch of Augustus that was officially bestowed on him in February of 2 BC, while Herod was yet alive according to Josephus. And the genealogy that follows ends with Seth, of Adam, of God. Adam was not physically born of God. He was created by God. But Adam is recorded as God's son in the book of the generations of Adam. And he received the earth as his inheritance from God. In Genesis 48, the 12 tribes of Israel become 13 tribes when Jacob adopts Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons. He says they are his just as Reuben and Simeon are his. And this is important because Ephraim and Manasseh were already Jacob's grandsons. But here, he makes them his legal sons. And as such, they each get a portion of his inheritance, which is how Joseph received the double portion. So why did Joseph receive the birthright? Was it just because he was Jacob's favorite son from his favorite wife? Deuteronomy 21:15 says, if a man have two wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated as the firstborn, by giving him a double portion of all that he hath. For he is the beginning of his strength, the right of firstborn is his. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. And the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. For Judah prevailed above his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler, but the birthright was Joseph's. So it wasn't just because he was his favorite. Genealogy is a biological reckoning, and Joseph is listed as Jacob's son there, but there is also a legal reckoning which concerns birthright and inheritance and functions more like a will. And from that perspective, Ephraim and Manasseh are not listed under Joseph, but as individual tribes and chronicles to uphold this. The birthright defaults to the oldest son. But what if a man has only daughters? In Numbers 27, we come to a man named Zelophehad of the tribe of Manasseh, who has 5 daughters and no sons. And they raised to Moses that it is not right that their father's name should be done away with just because he has no sons. And they asked that the inheritance be given to them instead of his brother. Yahuwah confirmed that they were right, and they received his inheritance. But in Numbers 36, the chiefs of Manasseh came back to Moses and raised that if his daughters married outside of the tribe, their inheritance will become their husbands, and Manasseh will lose part of his rightful allotment. Yahuwah confirmed that they were right also, and restricted women who have been given their father's inheritance from marrying outside of the tribe to prevent displacement of the inheritance. So what if a man has no children at all? Deuteronomy 25 says, if brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him, and perform the duty of an husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. So this is an expansion to the previous law, because the wife now has the husband's inheritance. And to prevent that inheritance from being displaced, she needs to marry his closest of kin to keep the inheritance within the family, just like Zelophehad's daughters. This is commonly called Levirate Marriage, and probably the most easily recognized example of it is in the book of Ruth. Naomi returned from Moab with no husband and no sons. only her husband's inheritance to sell to his nearest relative to ensure it remained in Judah, and a faithful daughter-in-law who that relative would also have to marry to raise up seed to her son Marlon. Ruth took it upon herself to initiate the marriage with Boaz at the counsel of Naomi. But there was a closer relative than Boaz who had the right of redemption, and he was willing to buy the land from Naomi until he found out about Ruth, at which point he refused because he would be taken from his own house to build Marlon's house. So Boaz gladly took Ruth and Elimelech's whole inheritance, since Orpah remained in Moab. And this, along with Boaz's entire inheritance, becomes the inheritance of Obed. So Obed received more than a double portion. But Obed is never reckoned the son of Marlon. He is always son of Boaz. Before Boaz and Ruth, there was Judah and Tamar. Judah had 3 sons by a Canaanite woman. His firstborn, Er, was wicked, so God slew him, and Judah told his next in line, Onan, to raise up seed to him. Now Onan was willing to sleep with Tamar, but he was not willing to build his brother's house. So he spilled his seed on the ground, and God slew him. At this point, Judah promises his youngest son, Shelah, to Tamar when he is grown. But it seems he became superstitious about her, since she was a common denominator in his son's deaths. So when the Canaanite woman died, and Tamar saw Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him, she took it upon herself to perform the duty with Judah, disguising herself as a harlot as he went to shear his sheep. Now Tamar knew this would be problematic, so she secured Judah's signet, bracelets, and staff as surety for her life. And once he found out she was pregnant, accused her of adultery and demanded she be burnt. She gave him his staff, bracelets, and signet back as proof of whose children they were. And he declared her more righteous than he, because while he withheld his son, she guarded the law. So both stories have one person who refused to do the duty and a woman who initiated getting it done. Judah's signet is the first that we see in scripture. The last we see is God's. When God strips the throne from Jeconiah, he compares it to throwing away his signet ring. But even before the signet was officially plucked off because of Coniah, his father Jehoiakim was cursed to have none to sit upon the throne of David for burning Jeremiah's scroll prophesying the Babylonian captivity in the 5th year of his 11-year reign. His son Coniah acceded the throne after he died, but he was written childless by Jeremiah, and his seed was cursed to never prosper sitting on the throne of David and ruling in Judah anymore. The curse of childlessness is very specific in scripture. It is linked to sleeping with your uncle's wife or your brother's wife. So it may be that Coniah pulled an Absalom move once he acceded the throne. Now there are different ways you can deal with Coniah's short stint on the throne. You can read the word sit as dwell and say a 3-month reign is not a throne dwelling. Or you can take the signet ring reference and consider that Jeconiah is either the product of a Levirate marriage or will become the father of one, or maybe even both. It is quite peculiar that God writes him childless instead of rendering him childless. And we see that he has 7 sons while in captivity. Maybe this means that they were all conceived in Babylon after the word went out. But if he had indeed pulled an Absalom, and all of the children were conceived in Jerusalem, they would have all been born about 9 months later, after the curse was pronounced, and he was in Babylon. Just a thought. So Coniah is as the removal of God's signet. But in Haggai 2, after the return from captivity, God promised to make Zerubbabel as his signet. He doesn't promise to make him the actual signet, but as a signet. So this is not a reversal of the rejection of Jeconiah, as we can see that Zerubbabel was not king. It just means something concerning the kingdom is going to happen through him that gets God his signet back. So we should be on the lookout for a Levirate marriage concerning Zerubbabel. Although Matthew and Luke's genealogies are traced through 2 brothers, the lines converge with Shealtiel. You might know Shealtiel through Ezra or Nehemiah. Well, we are told Zerubbabel is the son of Shealtiel. Or you might have noticed him in the passage we just saw in Haggai, where it says the same. According to 1 Chronicles 3, Coniah is Shealtiel's biological father. But instead of rolling up to him like we see in Matthew, here he rose up to Neri. So let's dive into this. Returning to Chronicles, we can see that Shealtiel was Coniah's firstborn, and his brothers are Malchiram, Pedaiah, Shenazar, Jeconiah, Hoshama, and Nebadiah. So Shealtiel gets a double portion of Coniah's inheritance. but never the throne because of his father's deeds. And the sons of Pedaiah were Zerubbabel and Shimei. Surprise! Zerubbabel is not actually the biological son of Shealtiel. He is the son of his brother Pedaiah. Now, because Pedaiah has other sons, while Shealtiel has no sons listed, and Zerubbabel is elsewhere the son of Shealtiel, this suggests that Zerubbabel's mother was the widow of Shealtiel. So Zerubbabel is biologically the son of Pedaiah, but being reckoned to Shealtiel through Levirate marriage. Since both of the brothers are sons of Jeconiah, we need to account for Shealtiel being reckoned to Nathan through Neri. To reconcile that, we must look at Shealtiel's mother. If Neri had only daughters, Shealtiel's wife would have received a portion of his inheritance. But if she was the only child, she would have gotten his full inheritance and passed it to Shealtiel. After he died with no heir, his wife passed it to Pedaiah, and they bore Zerubbabel, keeping his name alive. So Shealtiel passed at least a double portion of Jeconiah and perhaps a portion of Neri to Zerubbabel, but he may have received Jeconiah's full inheritance, since there is no other heir listed for any of his other 6 sons, or Zerubbabel's brother, Shimei, which would indeed render Jeconiah childless. Zerubbabel is the only son of a Levirate marriage that is called by the deceased father's name in Scripture. And although he did not sit on the throne, God still used him to rebuild the temple. Next in line for Luke is Rasa, and for Matthew, Abihud. Neither of these are listed as sons of Zerubbabel in Chronicles, but the fact that we are introduced to 4 untethered people named Raphiah, Arnan, Obadiah, and Shechaniah after Hananiah's sons are recorded is proof that this text is incomplete. If the error occurred before Hananiah and they are sons of Zerubbabel, Abihud is a plausible complementary name for Obadiah, and perhaps Rasa for Raphiah, or the 2 names could just be missing. And after these 2, the lines completely diverge again down to Heli. Traditionally, Luke's genealogy is attributed to Mary, but there is no precedent for this in Scripture, outside of a Gentile marrying into Israel, as we see with Jarka, the Egyptian, who continues Sheshan of Judah's name through his daughter. This supposition is the only connection between Mary and Judah, and its primary purpose is to try to make Yeshua a descendant of David through Mary, despite the fact that she cannot donate a Y chromosome to him because she doesn't have one. So it has no basis in Scripture. Since Joseph was biologically born of Jacob, and given that the mother and maternal grandfather of most of the royal line is given in Kings or Chronicles, this genealogy naturally represents Joseph's maternal line. So as with Neri, Joseph's mother was Heli's daughter, and if she was an heiress, his inheritance passed to Joseph through her, making Joseph legally and biologically the son of Heli. Finally, let's deal with Mary. We are given very little info on Mary's family to work with, but we have enough. We know that she was living in Galilee of Zebulun when she conceived, but so was Joseph, and he was of the house of David. We also know that Elizabeth was Mary's near kin, and that she was significantly older than Mary because she and Zechariah were well past their prime when they conceived, while Mary was a betrothed virgin. Elizabeth was a daughter of Aaron, meaning her father was of Aaron, suggesting that at least one of Mary's parents was also. If it were her father and he were still alive, we would expect to find her living in Judah, so her father could serve his course, since David's divisions were still functional. If he were not, and she had a brother, we might still expect to see him caring for her while serving his course. Instead, we find her in the non-Levitical small town of Nazareth, and the primary way for her to have gotten there is that her mother sold a Levitical property in Judah and returned to her father's house after her husband died. This would make Mary an heiress who couldn't serve in the priesthood she had inherited. The name Mary also supports Aaronic descent, as Miriam was Moses' sister. And names were important to the Levites, as we can see in the protests surrounding John's name. Even more notable, though, are the circumstances surrounding her pregnancy. As soon as she learned Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant, she traveled 80 to 100 miles to see her for 3 months, and both Elizabeth and Zechariah already had the word on her pregnancy. So God had provided witnesses in her defense, which is important because the daughter of a priest who disgraces her father is to be burnt. Finally, when she returned to Joseph, An angel came to him also to verify her pregnancy, so the word was fully established. Fast forward to the record of her purification, and we find even more witnesses, and it is carefully noted that everything was done according to the law. We see the 2 turtle doves that she offers, which are the offerings for the poor, but the 5 shekels for redemption of non-Levites is conspicuously absent. The finishing touch is that we see Yeshua being baptized in Jordan at 30 to fulfill all righteousness before relieving John. So he is serving in the course of Mary's father. Zechariah and John were in the course of Abijah, which is the 8th course, and the course that follows belongs to Yeshua. And a 1 Ithamar, 2 Eleazar lot casting places both in the house of Eleazar. So Mary's father was a son of Eleazar, and Yeshua, legal heir to the AARONIC priesthood through him. He is the legal heir to the priesthood of the firstborn through her, and of course, high priest of the heavenly priesthood as the Son of God. All that said, the purpose of these genealogies is not to prove that Yeshua is the rightful biological heir of the throne through Joseph, as both accounts plainly state that Joseph is not his father. So it is impossible to prove that through him, and certainly not through Mary. I think their purpose is to show that Joseph received a double portion in David through Zerubbabel, a portion from Solomon through Jacob, and a portion from Nathan through Heli. Through Joseph, the birthright and signet legally passed back to Yeshua, the root and offspring of David, to whom it already rightfully belonged. Through Joseph, God has legally given Yeshua the throne of David, his father.